All right, today we are starting the Spiderwick Chronicles book 4. This is called The Ironwood Tree. And we will start with chapter 1, in which there is both a fight and a duel. The engine of the station wagon was already running. Mallory leaned against the door, her everyday sneakers grungy against the bright white of her long fencing socks. Her hair was gelled and pulled back into a ponytail so tight that it made her eyes bulge. Mrs. Gray stood on the driver's side, her hands on her hips. "I found him," Jared panted, running up to join them. "Simon," their mother called, "where were you? We looked everywhere." "The carriage house," Simon said, "taking care of uh, a bird I found." Simon looked uncomfortable. He wasn't used to having to lie. That was mostly Jared's job. Mallory rolled her eyes. "Too bad Mom wouldn't leave without you." "Mallory," their mother said, shaking her head in disapproval, "all of you, get in the car. We're going to be late already, and I still have to drop something off." As Mallory turned to put her bag in the trunk, Jared noticed that her chest looked strange, stiff and weirdly big. "What are you wearing?" he asked, pointing. "Shut up," she said. He snickered. "It's just that you look like you've got—" "Shut up," she said again, getting into the front seat of the car while the boys climbed in the back. "It's for protection, and I have to have it on." Jared smiled against the window and watched the woods go by. There hadn't been any fairy activity in more than 2 weeks. Even Thimbletack had been quiet, and occasionally Jared had to remind himself that it was real. Sometimes it seemed like everything could be explained away. Even the burning water had been dismissed as simply being from a contaminated well. Until the old plumbing could be connected to a central line, they used gallons of supermarket water, without Mom thinking it was strange. But there was Simon's griffin, and that couldn't be explained by anything but Arthur's field guide. "Stop chewing on your ponytail," their mother said to Mallory. "What is making you so jittery? Is this new team really that good?" "I'm fine," Mallory said. Back in New York, she had fenced in sweatpants and a team jacket chosen from a pile. There had been a guy who'd hold up his hand on your side if you had scored. But at the new school, fencers wore real uniforms and had electric rapiers wired to a scoring machine that flashed lights when someone got hit. Jared thought that was enough to make anyone jumpy. Apparently, their mother had another explanation. "It's that boy, isn't it? The one you were talking to on Wednesday when I picked you up." "What boy?" Simon asked from the back seat, already starting to laugh. "Be quiet," said their mother, but she answered anyway. "Chris, the fencing captain. He is the captain, isn't he?" Their sister grunted non-committally. "Chris and Mallory sitting in a tree. Kissing," Simon sang. Jared giggled, and Mallory turned toward the back seat, eyes narrowed. "Want to lose all your baby teeth at once?" "Don't listen to them," their mother said, "and don't worry. You're a smart, pretty girl and a great fencer. I bet he likes you." "Mom!" Mallory groaned and sank lower in the front seat. Their mother stopped at the library where she worked, dropped off some paperwork, and returned to the idling car, somewhat out of breath. "Come on, I can't be late," Mallory said, smoothing her hair back unnecessarily. "It's my first match." Their mother sighed. "We're almost there." Jared resumed looking out the window in time to see what looked like a deep crater. They were driving over a stone bridge. The school bus never went this way. "Simon, look. What's that?" "It's an abandoned quarry," Mallory said impatiently, "where people used to dig up rocks." "A quarry," Jared echoed. He remembered something from a map they had found in their great-uncle Arthur's study. "Think they found any fossils?" Simon asked, half crawling over Jared to look out the window. "I wonder what dinosaurs lived in this area." Their mother was already pulling the car into the school parking lot. She didn't answer. Jared, Simon, and their mother climbed up onto the gymnasium bleachers while Mallory went to sit with her team. Already seated were a few other families and a smattering of people Jared recognized from school. A rectangular pad was spread out on the floor with the lines taped on it. Mallory called it a piste, but Jared thought it just looked like a long black mat. Behind it was a folding table where the scoreboard sat, its large colored buttons making it look more like a game than something important. The director was fiddling with the wires, connecting them to a foil and testing the force needed to make the buzzer sound and the lights flash. Mallory sat down on a metal chair at one end of the piece and started unpacking her bag. Chris squatted down to talk with Mallory. The other team milled around at the opposite end. All the uniforms were so white they made Jared's eyes hurt. Finally, the director announced that it was time for the first bout. He called two fencers up and made each of them strap a small receiver to the back of their pants, then attach cords to their foils. It all looked so professional. As the fencers began, Jared tried to recall what Mallory had said about the flashing lights, but he couldn't. "This is stupid. I like fencing better without all this junk," Jared said to no one in particular. 2 matches later, Jared had figured out that the colored lights meant that the hit was good, but the white light meant that the hit didn't count. Only hits in the chest counted, which was dumb, really, Jared had always thought. Getting hit in the leg hurt plenty, and Jared had practiced with Mallory enough to know. Finally, Mallory was called to the mat. Her opponent, a tall boy called Daniel something or other, snickered as he put on his mask. He obviously had no idea what was coming. Jared elbowed Simon as his brother put a pretzel into his mouth. "He's going to get it." "How?" said Simon. "Cut it out." Mallory's ponytail bounced as she advanced. Her sword struck Daniel hard in the chest before he could parry. The director raised one hand and the scoreboard lit with a point for Mallory. Jared grinned. Their mother was craning her whole body forward as if there were something to hear other than the clang of thin metal blades locked in the pattern of attack, parry, riposte. Daniel lunged desperately, too upset to control his advance. Mallory countered, turning her defense into an attack and scoring another point. Their sister beat Daniel without being touched once. They saluted each other formally, and the boy took off his mask, red-faced and breathing hard. When Mallory's mask came off, she smiled, eyes slitted with satisfaction. On the way back to the metal chairs, the fencing captain gave Mallory a quick, awkward hug. Jared couldn't see very well, but he could have sworn that Mallory's face flushed darker than it had been when she stepped off the mat. The bouts went on, with Mallory's team doing pretty well. When it was the captain's turn to fence, Mallory cheered loudly. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to help. He was defeated by a narrow margin. Slinking back to his seat, he walked past her without a word and shrugged off her attempts to talk to him. When Mallory was called to the mat again, Chris didn't even look up. Jared watched from the stands and scowled. His scowl deepened when he noticed a blonde-haired girl in white fencing garb rooting through his sister's bag. "Who's that?" Jared pointed. Simon shrugged. "I don't know. She hasn't fenced yet." Could the girl be a friend of his sister? Maybe she was just borrowing something. The furtive way the girl stopped when anyone from the team looked her way made Jared think she was stealing. But what would anyone want in a bag of Mallory's dirty socks and spare foils? Jared stood up. He had to do something. Didn't anyone else notice what was happening? "Where are you going?" his mother asked. "Bathroom," he lied automatically, even though his mother would be able to see him walking across the gym. He wished he could tell her the truth, but she would have made up some excuse for the girl. She thought the best of everyone, except him. Jared climbed down the bleachers and, staying close to the wall, crossed the court to where the girl was still rummaging. But as Jared approached the chairs, the coach stopped him. The fencing coach was wiry and short, with patchy white stubble on his face. "Sorry, kid, you can't come over here during the meet." "But that girl's trying to steal my sister's stuff." The coach turned. "Who?" As Jared swung around to point her out, though, he realized that she had disappeared. He fumbled for an explanation. "I don't know who she is. She hasn't fenced yet." "Everybody's fenced, kid. I think you better go back to your seat." Jared turned back to the bleachers embarrassed, then thought better of it. He'd go out to the bathroom so that maybe his mother would ask fewer questions when he returned. Just before he walked through the blue gym doors, he stopped and looked back. Now, Simon was fumbling through Mallory's bag. But Simon was wearing his clothes. Everyone would think it was him. He narrowed his eyes, wishing what he saw made sense. Then a horrible suspicion formed in his mind. Glancing up into the stands, he caught sight of his brother sitting beside his mother, chewing on pretzels. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't Simon. Chapter 2, in which the Grace twins are triplets. Jared couldn't move from the doorway. He heard the clanging of swords and cheering, but the sound seemed to come from far away. He watched in horror as the coach confronted his double. The man got red in the face, and some of the other players looked at Jared's double in shock. "Great," Jared grimaced. There was no way he could explain this. The coach pointed toward the large gym door, and he watched Not Jared stalk toward it, and toward him. As Not Jared got closer to Jared, it smirked. Jared clenched his hands into fist. Not Jared passed Jared without a single glance, slamming through the double doors. Jared wanted to find some way to wipe that smile off its face. He followed after it into a hallway lined with lockers. "Who are you?" Jared demanded. "What do you want?" Not Jared turned to face him, and something in its eyes made Jared go cold all over. "Don't you know me? Am I not your own self?" Its mouth curled into a sneer. It was strange to watch it move and speak. It wasn't like watching Simon with his tidy hair and the smear of toothpaste on his upper lip. And it wasn't quite himself either. The hair was messier, and the eyes were darker and different. It took a step toward him. Jared took a step back, wishing for any kind of fairy protection, and then he remembered the pocket knife in his jeans. Fairies hated iron, and the steel was at least part iron. He opened one of the blades. "Why don't you all just leave us alone?" This is the Not Jared. The creature threw back its head and laughed. "You can never get away from your own self." "Shut up, you're not me." Jared pointed the knife at his double. "Put that toy away," Not Jared said, its voice low and harsh. "I don't know who you are or who sent you, but I bet I know what you're looking for," said Jared. "The guide. Well, you're never going to get it." The creature's grin widened into something that still wasn't really a smile. Then suddenly it shrank back as though frightened. Jared watched in amazement as the Not Jared's body shrank. Its dark hair paled into a sandy brown, and its now blue eyes went wide with terror. Before Jared could fully comprehend what he was seeing, he heard a woman's voice behind him. "What's going on here? Put that knife down." The vice principal rushed up, grabbing Jared's wrist. The pocket knife clattered to the linoleum floor. Jared stared at the blade as the sandy-haired boy ran off down the hall, his sobs sounding a lot like laughter. "I can't believe you brought your knife to school," Simon whispered to Jared as they sat together outside the vice principal's office. Jared shot him a look. He had explained several times, even once to the police, that he was only showing the kid the knife, but they had never found the other boy to confirm the story. Then the vice principal had asked Jared to wait outside. Their mother had been in the vice principal's office a long time, but Jared couldn't hear what was going on. "What kind of fairy do you think that thing was?" Simon asked. Jared shrugged. "Wish we had the book so I could look it up." "You don't remember anything that could shapeshift like that?" "I don't know." Jared rubbed his face. "Look, I told Mom it wasn't your fault. You'll just have to explain." Jared gave a short laugh. "Yeah, like I can tell her what happened. I could say that kid stole something from Mallory's bag." When Jared didn't respond, Simon tried again. "I could pretend I did it. We could switch shirts and everything." Jared shook his head. Finally, their mother emerged from the vice principal's office. She looked tired. "I'm sorry," Jared said. He was surprised by the calm tone of her voice. "I don't want to talk about it, Jared. Get your sister and let's just go." Jared nodded and followed Simon, looking back just in time to see their mother sink down in the chair he had vacated. What was she thinking? Why wasn't she yelling? He found himself wishing that she was mad. At least that he would understand. Her quiet sadness was more frightening. It was like this was all she expected of him. Simon and Jared walked through the school, stopping to ask fencing team members if they had seen Mallory. None of them had. They even stopped Chris the captain. He looked uncomfortable when they asked about Mallory, but he shook his head. The gymnasium was empty. The only sounds the echo of their steps on the glossy wood floor. The black mat had been rolled up, and everything from the meet had been put away. Finally, a girl with long brown hair told them she'd seen Mallory, crying in the girls' bathroom. Simon shook his head. "Mallory? Crying? But she won." The girl shrugged. "I asked her if she was okay, but she said she was fine." "You think it was really her?" Simon asked as they walked toward the restroom. "You mean, was something impersonating her? Why would a fairy turn into Mallory and then cry in the girls' bathroom?" "I don't know," said Simon. "I'd cry if I had to turn into Mallory." Jared snorted. "So you want to go in there and look for her?" "I'm not going into the girls' room," Simon said. "Besides, you're already in so much trouble, there's no way you can get into more." "I can always get into more trouble," Jared said with a sigh. He pushed open the door. It looked surprisingly like the boys' room, except there were no urinals. "Mallory?" he called. No answer. He peered under the stalls, but he didn't see any feet. He pushed open one of the doors gingerly. Even though there was no one in there, he felt weird, jumpy, and embarrassed. After a moment, he darted back out into the hall. "She's not in there?" Simon said. "It's empty." Jared glanced past the line of lockers, hoping no one had seen them. "Maybe she went to the office looking for us," Simon said. "I don't see her anywhere." A feeling of dread uncoiled in the pit of Jared's stomach. After the vice principal had caught him, he hadn't really thought about anything but how much trouble he was in. But that thing was still running around the school. He remembered how the creature had looked through Mallory's bag at the match. "What if she went outside?" Jared said, hoping that they could still find her before it did. "She could have gone out to see if we were waiting by the car." "We could look," Simon shrugged. Jared could tell he wasn't convinced, but they walked outside anyway. The sky had already deepened to purples and golds. In the dimming light, they walked past the track and the baseball field. "I don't see her," Simon said. Jared nodded. His stomach churned with nervousness. "Where is she?" he wondered. "Hey," Simon said. "What's that?" He walked a few feet and leaned down to pick up something shining in the grass. "Mallory's fencing medal," Jared said. "And look." On the grass, large chunks of rock formed a circle around the medal. Jared knelt down beside the largest stone. Engraved deeply in the rock was a word: trade. "Stones," Simon said, "like from the quarry." Jared looked up, surprised. "Remember the map we found? It said dwarves live in the quarry. But I don't think dwarves can shapeshift. Mallory could still be inside with Mom. She could be in the office waiting for us." Jared wanted to believe it. Then why is her medal out here? Maybe she dropped it. Maybe this is a trap. Simon started walking back toward the school. "Come on," he said. "Let's go back and see if she's with Mom." Jared nodded numbly. When they got back inside, they found their mother at the school entrance talking into her cell phone. Her back was to them, and she was alone. Although their mother was speaking softly, her voice traveled easily to where they were crouched. "Yeah, I thought things were getting better too, but, Jared never admitted to what happened when we first moved here. And well, this is going to sound strange, but Mallory and Simon are so protective of him." Jared froze, both dreading what she was going to say and unable to make himself to do anything to stop her from continuing. "No, no, they deny he ever did any of those things, and they're keeping something from me. I can tell by the way they stop talking when they come into a room, the way they cover for one another, especially for Jared. You should have heard Simon tonight, making up excuses for his brother pulling a knife on that little boy." Here she made a choked noise and began crying. "I just don't know if I can handle him anymore. He is so angry, Richard. Maybe he should go and stay with you for a while." "Dad." She was talking to their dad. Simon jabbed Jared in the arm. "Come on, Mallory's not here." Jared turned dazedly and followed his brother out the door. He could not have said how he felt at that moment, except maybe hollow. Chapter 3, in which Simon solves a riddle. "What are we going to do?" Simon asked as they walked back down the hallway. "They have her," Jared said softly. He had to blot out what he had just heard, blot everything from his mind except Mallory. "They want to trade her for the guide." "But we don't have it." "Shh," Jared said. He had an idea, but he didn't want to say it out loud, out in the open air. "Come on." Jared went to his locker and got a towel from his gym bag. He picked out a textbook, Advanced Mathematics, that was about the same size as the guide, and folded it in the cloth. "What are you doing?" "Here," he whispered, shoving the wrapped package at Simon. He grabbed his backpack from the locker. "Thimbletack fooled us with this trick. Maybe we can fool whoever took Mallory." Simon nodded once. "Okay. I think Mom has a flashlight in the car." They clambered over a chain-link fence at the edge of the schoolyard and crossed the highway. The other side of the road was overgrown with weeds. It was hard to walk in the dark, and the flashlight gave off only a faint, narrow light. They climbed over a large pile of rocks, some covered in slick moss, others cracked in parts. As they went, Jared couldn't stop replaying what he had overheard. He thought about the awful things that his mother believed, and the even more awful things she was likely to believe now that he had disappeared. No matter what he did, he wound up in deeper and deeper trouble. What if he were expelled? What if she were to send him out to live with his dad? Who wouldn't want him? Jared, look, said Simon. They had come to the edge of the old quarry. The rock had been mined jaggedly. Chunks of stone stuck out like ledges along the nearly 30-foot drop to the uneven valley below. Scrubby bits of grass grew along the walls from thick veins of dirt. The highway ran over the top of the cavern, elevated on a thick stone bridge. It's weird to mine rocks, isn't it? Simon asked. I mean, they're just rocks. Probably granite, he continued when Jared didn't answer. Simon wrapped his thin jacket tighter around himself. Jared shone his flashlight along the walls, catching a streak of rust and a blush of ochre in the beam. He had no idea what kind of stone it was. Simon shrugged. So, how are we going to get down there? I don't know. Why don't you tell me if you know so much? Jared snapped. We could, Simon started, but he trailed off, and Jared felt bad. Let's just try to climb down, said Jared, pointing. We can jump to that ledge and then try to get to another one. It's pretty far down. We should get a rope or something. We don't have time, Jared said. Here, hold the light. Thrusting the metal cylinder into his twin's hands, Jared sat on the edge of the cliff. Without the flashlight, when he looked down, he saw only the deep darkness below. Taking a breath, he scooted off, letting himself drop to a stone shelf he could not see. Turning, he started to stand. Light shone in his eyes, blinding him. He stumbled and fell forward. Are you all right? Simon called. Jared shaded his face and tried to keep calm. Yeah, come on, your turn. He heard the crunching of dirt above him as Simon got into position. Quickly, Jared moved out of the way, feeling ahead of him for an edge he only dimly remembered. Simon landed heavily beside him with a yelp. The flashlight tumbled from Simon's hands and fell into darkness, hitting the valley floor hard, bouncing once and then lying still, illuminating a thin path of scrub and stone. How could you be so dumb? Jared felt his temper like it was a living thing inside him, growing by the minute. Only shouting seemed to keep it from overwhelming him. Why didn't you throw it down to me? How are we going to climb down in the dark? What if Mallory's in danger? What if she dies because you were such a moron? Simon's head came up, his eyes shining with tears, but Jared was as shocked as his brother. I didn't mean it, Simon, he said hastily. Simon nodded but turned his face away from Jared. I think there's another ledge there. See that shape? Simon still didn't say anything. I'll go first, Jared said. He took a deep breath and dropped into the blackness. He hit the second ledge hard. It must have been farther down than he had thought. His breath was knocked out of him, and his hands and knees were on fire. Slowly, he pushed himself upright. His jeans were ripped widely over one knee, and his arm had a cut that started to bleed sluggishly. But from there, it was only a short hop down to the quarry floor. Jared? Simon's voice came faintly from where he was still sitting at the top ledge. I'm here, Jared called. Don't move. I'll get the light. He crawled over to grab the flashlight and turned it toward his brother, searching out ledges where Simon could step or niches he could grab. Slowly, Simon climbed his way out to the ground, down to the ground, but as he waited, Jared noticed echoing sounds, a distant thrum and a pounding that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Shining the flashlight around the quarry, he saw more jagged rock with faint traces of drill lines. He now wondered how they were ever going to get out. But before he had time to worry about that, the light flashed on an overhang of rock on the wall. As the light passed over the stone, As the light passed over the stone, a mottled pattern of fungi gave off a dim bluish glow. Bioluminescence, Simon said. Huh? Jared took a step closer. When something makes its own light. By the weak glow, Jared saw that a rectangle of stone under the ledge had been carved with a pattern of intertwining grooves. Looking at the center of the rock, he could make out the tops of the letters hewn into the stone. He turned the flashlight directly on them. Seem to trick, hen took pen. A riddle, said Jared. Doesn't make any sense, said Simon. Who cares about that? How do we solve it? They didn't have time to stand around now. They were almost inside. Almost to Mallory. You solve the one back at the house, said Simon, sitting down with his back to his brother. You figure it out. Jared took a deep breath. Look, I'm really sorry about what I said before. You have to help, Jared pleaded. Everyone knows you're smarter than I am. Simon sighed. I don't understand the riddle either. A hen is a girl chicken, right? And a pen could be the place where they keep chickens? I don't know about the rest. Jared looked at the words again. He couldn't seem to concentrate. What trick could a chicken perform? Maybe they were supposed to offer eggs at the entrance? Did the guide say anything about chickens and fairies? He wished he had the book now. Hey, wait a minute, Simon said, turning around and kneeling up. Give me that light. Jared handed over the flashlight and watched as Simon scratched out the message in the thin dirt with his finger. Then he started scratching out certain letters and writing them above in a different pattern. Mites open 3 talk con. What are you doing? Jared sat down beside his twin. I think you have to rearrange the letters to get the real message, like those puzzles in the paper Mom is always doing. Simon inscribed a third phrase in the dust. Knock 3 times to open. Wow, said Jared. He couldn't believe that Simon had figured it out. He never would have solved it. Simon grinned. Easy, he said, walking up to the door and knocking 3 times on the hard stone face. Just then the ground shifted underneath them, and both twins fell into the chasm that opened beneath their feet.